welcome to the Magnifying Glass Podcast. For today's episode, we have Peggy Nash, who is a former NDP Member of Parliament for the Parkdale High Park riding in Toronto from 2006. She also served as the official opposition critic in the portfolios of finance and industry. She was a senior labor negotiator with the Canadian auto workers in the auto, transportation, and service sectors. She resides in Toronto, and she's received her bachelor honors in the University of Toronto. Thank you for listening. So my first question is, what inspired you to run for Member of Parliament, and why did you choose the NDP? Does growing up and living in Toronto have an impact at all? Or your time as a labor official for CAW? Is the federal aspect more meaningful for you in politics?
So those are many questions, but let me try to answer them together.
Okay.
I did not see myself in politics as a young person. It was not something I aspired to. However, from a young age, I did have values that were more progressive, that ultimately did align best with the NDP. Although, again, as a young person, I saw myself significantly to the left of the NDP. As a very young person, I was involved in international solidarity and tended to look at international issues. But then I got involved, after university, I got involved in my union and in the struggles to protect jobs and standards of living at the dawn of neoliberalism in the Reagan-Thatcher era. And that led to a number of strikes and bankruptcies. I was in the airline sector, and so it was hit by airline deregulation, privatization, and then our union merged with the newly independent Canadian Union of Auto Workers, and we were almost immediately thrust into the struggle against free trade. And I had always been a feminist and an activist on human rights. But what I experienced in the union, although I absolutely loved collective bargaining, it is a really democratic way to engage with workers and to address their concerns with the employer. You can make significant material changes to people's lives fairly quickly in some cases. But what we saw was gains that we thought we had made being quickly undone through conservative governments and some liberal governments. And then seeing role models in, I remember Helen Clark in New Zealand talking about childcare, and I've been a long time childcare advocate. And David Miller got elected in Toronto. And I went to a person who had worked on Miller's campaign, and I said, do you think New Democrat could get elected in my area in Parkdale High Park? And his first answer was, well, who were you thinking of? And I said, me. And he said, soccer mom, labor leader, community activist. Yeah, if you're interested, call me. So I did and ran for elected office. So that's how it happened. Always saw myself at the federal level. Because of partly the international piece, but mostly the architecture of the economy. The financial structure, the taxation structure that could create the programs, the jobs that would support the work I had done in collective bargaining.
So you've always been drawn to the federal side of it. It just seems like a lot of things can get done with that level, I find, or like it's very important in the other levels too, but it just seems there's just so much national kind of things that need to be touched on the federal level, like especially with childcare, you said right now. So for my next question, what do you think were the most challenging parts of being an MP, and what were some of the most inspiring moments for you?
Well, I have to start off by saying I loved almost every minute of it.
Okay.
I loved working with the community. You know, if you knock on every door in your community multiple times,
Yes.
know the community organizations, you really get a sense of the heartbeat of your community.
Yes.
And when you can match that to changes you're trying to make in the
Yes.
House of Commons, that's a great experience. Or bringing together people in the community. You
For
know,
sure.
maybe this arts group didn't know that this veterans group was doing something, they could collaborate.
Yeah.
I love that, and being able to help people, you know,
Mhm.
whether it's you know, I remember this one man from Eritrea. He was visually impaired, and his brother was in a refugee camp. I don't
Okay.
remember where. And he, you know, we worked together for a number of years to try to get his brother to
Yes.
Canada. And after I left politics, he contacted me to say that it came through. They were successful, and he
Oh.
wanted to thank me. And, you
Oh.
know, things like that, or people who are caring for a relative who has significant health limitations, and you can get them
Yes.
a caregiver's tax credit. That I remember one woman, we got her $30,000 in back credits. It's
Oh, wow.
you know, it's things like that. If you're really engaged, you can help people with. What was difficult for me, I was in two terms, and the first term was a minority government, and at that point,
Yes.
but they were both conservative governments, and
Oh, they were? Okay.
yeah, and
Yes.
at that point, the minority government, at least you can have some influence. And there was a couple of things that I was able to do that did
Yeah.
make a difference, I believe, a material difference. But once you have a majority government, and it's a phony majority government always, because it's never a majority, or rarely a majority of the population, because of the political system we use to elect members of parliament. It's not proportional. So in a majority government, a lot of the time you're whistling in the wind. You know, you really, if the government doesn't want to make a change, it's not going to happen. And all you can hope to do is make enough noise and create enough ruckus that the government feels the pressure, and you're able to make change. And we see that now provincially, where Mart Stiles and the NDP are really pushing hard enough on the issue of the awarding of contracts, and changes in laws to benefit certain developers or certain corporations. And I mean, again, they're facing a majority government, but they're creating enough, you know, heat. But
Yes.
it was harder federally. I think the advantage of federal politics is it is really the architecture of the country.
Okay.
The further you get from where people live,
Yes.
the less they pay attention. I mean, a local stop sign for a community in terms of immediacy might really outweigh, you know, sort of broad, hazy environmental legislation, even though
Yeah.
it's also extremely important. So, yeah, that's the disadvantage.
Oh, eloquently said. I agree. It almost sounds like it can be challenging if they're the majority, like the conservatives, or if you're a Green or NDP or Bloc Quebecois. Does it make it more difficult to voice your concerns with bills in Parliament if they're the majority? Or I've always wondered that.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
yeah.
First of all, if there's a majority government, you have a majority in the House. You get most of the time.
Oh, yes.
You make most of the decisions. Well, you win all of the votes.
Oh,
On
okay.
committees, you have a majority on committees. You get to
Yes.
appoint the chairs of committees, I think all except for one. And it really, it's not, I don't think that it's very democratic. In a minority government, which we have
Yes.
today, which means that the government does not have a majority of the votes in the House, and they have to count on other parties to pass bills,
Yes.
then you can make change. And so I have
Okay.
that experience of allying with other opposition parties to
Yeah.
be able to win votes. What Jagmeet Singh and the NDP have done in this parliament is agree to support a minority liberal government in exchange for concrete gains that the
Okay.
liberals would not have made if they
Yeah.
weren't obliged to. So in a minority, I always find it more democratic because governments have to consult. And I think it turns down the tone in the House of Commons because they have to be more collegial. You can't demonize someone and then say, but will you vote for my bill? So
Right.
I think it does foster more civil debate and discussion in the House.
That's interesting. I never thought of it that way. Like when you said it's not very democratic, if there's a majority, is that to do with the first past the post issue? A lot of people have debates on how it should be, revived or rechanged. I find it not very democratic myself, but no system's perfect, right? But it could be improved.
No system is perfect, but
Yeah.
when you have a situation where if you are, I don't know, a Green Party voter,
Right.
and you might have, I can't remember what the standings were in the last election, but maybe you have 10% of the population supporting you,
Okay.
but they're spread all across the country,
Yes.
and they may not be able to elect MPs. I mean, I think right now they have two, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
And but they would get more than that with 10% of the vote. And if you are, I don't know, a liberal in Alberta, good luck
Yeah.
to you, because people can vote liberal, but in fact, if your riding is historically conservative, your vote is wasted. In Toronto, federally, all but one of all of the seats are liberal. So if you're a New Democrat, a conservative, a Green, forget it. Your votes don't count. You are not represented. So I
Okay.
don't think that's fair. I am a fan of the German system of
Okay.
proportional representation, where you have both a local representative and a party representative to
Yeah.
reflect the true number of votes. And
Okay.
I think that would make more sense. And it usually means, like in the current government, I think they have something like they got 38% of the people who voted in the last election.
Oh, wow.
They wouldn't, and that's been that way for the last couple of elections, maybe more. I mean, you can win, they probably have less than that. You can win a majority government with 38% of the vote based
Oh,
on the distribution of the votes. And that means, again, you have a minority of the population, but you win a majority of the seats
right.
and you win 100% of the votes.
Yes.
So I don't think that's fair.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. It seems like the European, not all European countries, but it just seems like it's a fair, a lot of them tend to be a little more socially active or minded in some ways.
It's a very small minority of countries that have a
Yeah.
first past the post system. The vast majority of democracies have some form of proportional representation.
I did not know that. Okay, that's good to know.
It
And
also
just,
benefits women
oh,
because,
okay.
I mean, just one example, and I know it's a country that still has huge problems, but South Africa, their first post-apartheid election, of course, the huge issue I was there, I was an observer. The big issue was dismantling a racist system of government, but
Yes.
they also mandated a 30% gender component,
Okay.
which they can just say in a proportional system that you must have that number. Some countries like Iceland have gender equal requirements, and I think
Oh,
it's not impossible in a first past the post system, but much more difficult.
I did not know that. That's very intriguing. And I think, like, just to rewind a little bit back, I think you mentioned it. It sounds like in provincial politics, it can be harder to support or champion one party if Alberta is very conservative or BC maybe more environmental. So I think the provincial side has a huge impact on who can get elected or who can voice their opinion and concerns. It makes Canadian politics very unique and diverse, I think, but complex as well.
Well, Karli, it's such a huge country, and I
Yeah,
ran for the leadership of the NDP at one point, and it
yeah,
it really hit home to me. I used to think my riding was big, and the neighborhoods change from block to block. And it is. They're very,
yeah,
this street might be concerned about this, but that street over there, they want that. This is a
yeah,
tenant group, but that's a homeowner, old fashioned
yeah,
group. They all vary. They all have a right to their priorities and
yeah.
goals. But when you go across the country, you really get a sense of just how geographically huge this place is,
Oh, it is.
and how varied the concerns of people are. I don't know, you go past the Rockies to BC and it's so
Yeah.
much is about salmon. Everybody cares about salmon.
Okay.
And I mean, there are real differences, but there are also similarities. In Alberta, the kind of independence and pride of place struck
Yeah.
me as similar but different to the Quebecois sense of nationhood. And
Okay. Yeah.
I found similarities and good people everywhere. And I just think our current political system doesn't listen as closely to all regions of the country. And I think that's unfortunate because it tends to lead to more divisions rather than. I don't think we need to be homogenous. I think differences are important, but I
Yes.
don't think we have enough good constructive dialogue.
Yes. I think it's wonderful in a way, but it can make politics more messy and complicated if people have just very diverse views on certain policies. That's the struggle with provincial provinces, I think.
The
Yeah.
good thing about provinces,
Yeah.
though, is that they deliver most of the services. So I think for provincial
Okay.
politicians, that's where the rubber hits the road a lot of the times in terms of how the federal government can create the architecture for
Okay.
taxation, for federal laws, but it is the provinces that actually spend the money and deliver the services and are responsible for the municipalities. So provincial governments are incredibly important. For me, I always just felt more at home federally.
Okay. That's good to know. Do you think voting should be mandatory? I know Australia, I believe it's mandatory to vote. I don't know what your thoughts are that as a former politician. Um,
Yeah, I don't have strong feelings one way or the other. I mean, I would be interested to hear a debate about it.
yeah,
You know, I am not necessarily opposed to it, but when I was running for office, my goal was to inspire and engage people, especially young people or newcomers who had not voted before, try to
yes,
inspire them to vote and, offering them the opportunity to act on their values by getting involved in a campaign, whether it was mine or my opponent, but to
yes,
be involved in shaping things. I think organizing and engaging people is, I feel, better than mandating them to vote. I just
okay,
think of myself kind of at 20, I remember voting in one municipal election. And I thought, well, I really don't know who these people are. I was kind of like blind, figuring out which candidate I'm going to vote for.
Right.
The act of voting, I think, is an important experience. And maybe if you go through that, then the next time you think, yeah, I better actually get my act together and find out who I'm supporting.
Yes.
So I'm not opposed to it. I just think
Yes,
engaging people is the best.
it is. I agree. Just curious, what are your thoughts on participatory democracy? I don't know if the House of Commons is kind of like that, or I think people have different thoughts. Like, should communities have more of a say when in parliament or politics?
Mm-hmm.
Just curious to know your view on that.
Yeah, I think we're going to get an opportunity to do that in Toronto because the new mayor, Olivia Chow,
Yeah.
is creating a participatory budget process based on, I think, the Brazilian model initially. And she's encouraging everyone to get involved, to list their priorities. They're going to have a draft list of priorities. It'll go back out to people. And she's really trying to create a sounding board where it's
Okay.
not developers, lobbyists, insiders who set the agenda. It's the people of Toronto. So I think that is important. I think when you're talking about immediate services, that's the best opportunity for participatory democracy. But,
Okay.
we saw that in the US with Barack Obama, where his whole focus in his first campaign was on organizing and participatory democracy in terms of people engaging on the issues that mattered to them, and that allowed
Yeah.
organizers all across the country to build support. I like that form of politics.
Okay.
When it comes to, like I used to when I was elected, I tried to have community forums on, a budget's coming up, let's hear from you,
Yeah.
come to a meeting. They were singularly poorly attended. Like people are busy too. They weren't, come and have your say on the upcoming budget. Nah.
Yeah.
Most
Oh,
people were not interested in doing that federally. I think municipally, it's a different matter because it's closer to where people live.
that's interesting. I did some reading, and you introduced a bill as an MP to reinstate a national minimum wage of $10 per hour. I think that
It was
was
a long time ago.
yes, compared to today.
Yeah.
You also touched on water sustainability, I read, and public transit and the arts, and once in a lifetime bill to reunite new Canadians with their families. I thought that was very important. Were there certain bills that were difficult to pass in legislation or bring up?
All of them. All of
Okay.
them. Again, it was a majority conservative government. All of them. I remember
Okay.
I brought in, I don't remember if it was a motion or a bill on animal welfare, not animal rights. I wasn't giving them citizenship, but animal welfare. And oh
Okay.
my God, the howling from the conservatives. You're trying
Oh,
to
really?
take away the livelihood of farmers and hunters. And all I wanted to do was have people not torture pets, right? So,
Oh,
or any animal, like, the way
yeah.
pigs are transported. And anyway, that was
Okay.
singularly unsuccessful. Yeah, I had a bill on, I think it was a bill or a motion on side guards on trucks, transport trucks, because we had a cyclist, young mother, killed in our neighborhood who
Oh,
was
dear.
caught under the wheels of a big transport truck.
Okay.
I brought in a motion on a national cycling strategy.
Okay.
Other countries have it. I thought if the federal government set guidelines and put some resources into it, then municipalities could grab onto it and invest in cycling infrastructure. But the $10 minimum wage was an important one. It was at a time I'll never
Yeah.
forget standing at the bus stop or the streetcar stop, pardon me, at King and Dufferin, and speaking with some people there. It was like 7 a.m. They were getting on the streetcar to go to work, probably at the hotels downtown. And I'll never forget this woman saying to me, "Oh my God, do you think we could get $10 an hour?" And I think they were probably making 7 or 8. I
Right.
mean, and these were hardworking people that would
Yes.
have
Yeah.
long days, were supporting families on absolute rock bottom
Yeah.
wages.
Oh.
So, I mean, I actually don't think we should have a set minimum wage. I think the best solution is a formula. So we don't have to keep debating this. I think we should have a formula
Okay.
whereby we have a minimum wage set at a comparison with the average wage. So that would, and adjusted for inflation.
Okay.
So if your average industrial wage is, I don't know, $30 an hour, then maybe you have a formula where it gets set at a certain percentage of that allows for a living wage. Of course, in
Okay.
Toronto, that would probably be about $50 an hour today. So,
Whoa.
no, I'm pulling a number out of the air. It's just so
Right.
ridiculously expensive for people in the city.
I would love to live there, but it's a bit pricey. Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah. One of my goals is to apply for the Ontario Legislator Internship Program
Yes.
at Queen's Park. Oh, I hear it's wonderful experience. So
Yeah. I've spoken to those groups. I'm going to
okay.
speak to the federal parliamentary interns in, I don't know, sometime soon, but the provincial ones, they all seem to love it, and they seem to be a really good group. I would encourage you to apply.
Oh, I hear a lot of them want to be MPs after things like that. Yeah.
They bring so many speakers in for them to
Okay.
interview, and just the experience. Some of it can be off-putting. Sometimes the debates seem very puerile and silly, or avoiding
Yeah.
questions get avoided. But
Yes.
like most things in life, it's based on building relationships with people.
Well said. I agree. Communication is key. So I read that in 2005, you became the first woman to negotiate a major contract with one of the Detroit-based automobile corporations.
Mhm.
If you could tell me or delve into that experience a little more, and what was it like, and why was this an important issue for you?
As I said, I came out of the airline sector, which was a group of mostly women. However, at the time, all of our staff reps were men in the
Okay.
airlines. But, we started organizing, and
Yeah.
got that changed. But we joined the Canadian Auto Workers, and from about the 1980s,
Okay.
I was part of the national representation on the bargaining teams for major bargaining. And so I had been to the bargaining table, and I knew most of the leadership. But to be fair, like many major industrial workplaces, these were still very male-dominated workplaces. There were.
I didn't know that.
So, extremely. Like
Wow.
there's one picture I have from, I forget what year. I think maybe 93. And it was in McLean's, and there's a picture, and there's this whole row of men, and like I'm the one woman. and but I was the very first time I was brought in doing communications, and then I was pushing around human rights, gender equity, and it was challenging. And I think I'm writing a history about that now. And generally, I think the top leadership wanted to do the right thing. But, culture is a very difficult thing to change, and you certainly don't do it with one woman. But over time, I did more bargaining in major sections, had more difficult challenges. And it's a long story how I got there, but I asked to bargain in auto. And anyway, I was assigned to Ford, and I asked for Ford because the head of labor relations was a woman. The Canadian
Okay.
vice president was a woman. And Ford being, dominated by the Ford family, usually wanted to have more, of the last period when I was there over the decades,
Mm-hmm.
wanted good labor relations generally. So,
Okay.
and we bargained an excellent collective agreement. And, but, I had to really work to win the confidence of the leadership on the union side.
Yes. Yes.
So that's always, and every leader has to. But, today there is, as of last summer, there is a woman president. Summer, not this year, but last year. There's a woman president of
Okay.
Unifor, and she just led bargaining through all of the auto companies, through Ford, GM, and Stellantis. And
Oh, wow.
so she's the leader of all of it, and she's doing a brilliant job. And culture doesn't change overnight, but sometimes there are catalysts like this that really
Yeah.
spark that kind of change. So it's a very exciting period right now for workers.
Okay, that's interesting to know. I didn't know that. I was just curious to know, has an MP, do certain MPs have maybe more of a voice or like a better platform or recognition depending where their MP like riding is? Like if you're in Ottawa or Vancouver or the bigger cities, that do they have a more like a voice in Parliament or no? Is it all kind of like equal?
So, okay, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
And no, it is not.
Okay. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, but it's not
Yeah.
necessarily just based on, well, you're the MP for, I don't know, Ottawa Centre, you automatically get more of a say. So, first of all, the weight of a party in Ottawa or in provincial politics is based
Yes.
on the number of seats you have. So, again,
Okay.
if you're the governing party, you get the most time. You get to appoint ministers. They get a lot of speaking time. They make a lot of decisions. They chair
Right.
committees. When they make announcements, the media all comes. So they get the most space.
Okay.
And, it goes next to the opposition, the official opposition. So I was the official opposition finance critic. I got huge time because I was going up against the finance minister.
Okay.
Whereas someone who didn't really have a profile, high profile portfolio, they
Yeah.
didn't get as many questions in the House. They didn't maybe sit on a committee with that prominence.
Yes.
But there are
Yes.
other factors. So people get these positions partly by who they are and the skills they bring. So if you are, say you get elected when you're a student, and it happens, and you don't
Oh, really?
really have that much experience, they're not going to put you in chairing a committee or, a prominent role. They're going to give you time to learn. So that is a factor. Another factor is how well you perform. If you really are struggling or very nervous or
Yeah.
not doing well, or if you've had a scandal, you're not going to be very prominent.
Okay.
But another thing is party politics. So if you represent a seat in what's called a swing riding, it might go Conservative this time, Liberal next time, NDP next time. That's an important seat because sometimes it's just a handful of swing ridings that can mean the difference between a
Okay.
minority or a majority government. So those seats sometimes get selected for, if you're in government, for cabinet positions or for other high profile speaking positions,
Okay.
because you want people in that riding, in that constituency, to see their MP, who is a representative of the governing party or the opposition party, You want to give
Right.
them that profile.
Well said. I did not know that. Um, just to build on that, what are your thoughts on party discipline? I hear that's an important thing for MPs and political parties, but sometimes I hear maybe there's an MP that goes against the grain or doesn't like a certain policy or an ideology. Like, are there problems with party discipline? I think maybe that's where independent MPs come in, or I don't know if you have any thoughts on that with Jody racing Will Bald and all that stuff.
Yeah, or Sarah Jama more recently. So, yeah, I wrote about that in my book. If you are going to run under the banner of a political party, you do need to understand what a caucus is and what caucus discipline is. There are many arguments that say caucus discipline is too strict. There's a book called Whipped, which is about whipped votes and
Okay.
the discipline that goes with that. So generally, if you run with a political party, and you're usually interviewed ahead of time, you are agreeing to support the policies of that party, and you're going to work in a respectful way with the other members of that party and in that caucus of people who get elected with the leader, the leader's team. And, you know, if your values align with the values of your party, generally that works well. Occasionally, it doesn't. Either something comes up where you just have a fundamental disagreement. You know, you can't predict everything, or your views change, or the party is doing something that you don't agree with. And there's, you know, parties usually work hard to try to keep their MPs happy and supporting the direction. There's usually lots of discussion before a direction is taken. But sometimes that does not work out. It can't be resolved. And so there are a variety of things you can do. Sometimes there are votes and an MP will just stay away because they cannot vote as the party wants them to. Sometimes, occasionally, they'll say, listen, I have to vote in a different way, and they'll get permission from their party. And sometimes they will take a position that's just really opposed to their party. Judy Wilson-Raybould, you know, she, I think, was trying to defend a position with integrity. Anyway, if that break happens, then you know, a party can discipline a member, taking away speaking opportunities, taking away their ability to sit in a committee, or they can kick them out of the party, and that has happened. Now, sitting as an independent, you can sit out your term. It is extremely difficult to get elected as an independent. Judy Wilson-Raybould did it. It's not fun. When you get elected, you don't get to go on committees. You get almost no speaking time. So you can represent your community, but you really have, you get to vote, but your one little vote doesn't really, for the most part, matter. So I think many independents really focus on their community.
That's good to know. It almost sounds, it's just very fragile and a weak route for electoral politics because you don't have a, you know, overarching identity or theme like a liberal or NDP, or it's just, it really splinters you away from all that. Do you find that the NDP is losing its roots with the labor side of things? Like historically, it's been very rooted with labor politics, or has there always been a positive traction and momentum with it? I don't know if we have mixed views on that, because I heard, I don't know if it's during Layton's time, but there was legislation where they banned unions and like political corporate donations from for being able to donate or have ties with the NDP. I don't know if that kind of lost traction. It was from a scholarly paper called Solitary Forever, the NDP Organized Labor and the Changing Face of Party Finance in Canada.
Who wrote that? It's
Good question.
If you don't have it handy.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely correct. that
Yes.
the law was passed. I believe it was under Chrétien.
Okay.
Might have been Chrétien, that would ban corporate and union donations. And I agree with
Okay.
that, because corporations
Oh,
will always outspend labor when it comes to political donations. They just have deeper pockets. So I support that, and I think I would support a system where there's greater public money that goes into supporting political campaigns to try to get more money out of, individual donations. But I think that was one factor. Another factor in reducing union affiliation with the NDP was the decision by the NDP to move to a one member, one vote system rather than a delegated convention.
okay.
But I think there are greater forces at work here. I think
Okay.
under neoliberalism, there really was a greater push to undermine labor rights,
Yes.
erode job security. That
Yes.
tended to break up workplaces, break up communities. It had a huge impact, I think, on working class culture.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And, while there have always been groups of workers who voted for conservative or liberal parties,
Yeah.
that has intensified to the point now where we see in Ontario and federally conservative leaders making explicit calls for working class support and positioning themselves as the champions of workers' rights.
Mm-hmm.
You'll never see them on a picket line. You'll
Okay.
never see them taking on the boss, but they are positioning themselves as the voice of independent individual workers. So I think that what the NDP needs to do is make a similar appeal to
Okay.
workers, but rather than undermining workers' rights, to be champions of workers' rights.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that is through collective rights. I look at the recent collective agreements in the auto sector.
Mm-hmm.
There are workers whose wages are going to double over the next 3
Okay.
years. And
Oh,
that only
wow.
happens because they have a union. So I
Okay.
think championing collective workers' rights is something only the NDP is going to do in a really dedicated way. Although I have to say, this Liberal government federally has been much better than previous governments
Oh,
in
wow.
terms
Okay.
of, towards labor rights, have been much more sympathetic.
I had no idea.
Mm.
To get to the heart of it, I noticed you wrote a book called Women Winning Office. It seems like an inspiring and aidful read. I read a little bit of it. Do you think that women should strive to enter all level of politics, municipal, provincial, federal? It seems more women I've noticed succeed at the municipal level more than any other. I don't know if that's to do with community reasons or family commitment reasons. There's been great strides with Valerie Plantee with Project Montreal. We have Olivia Chow now, Bonnie Crombie, but she's going into the Liberal, I think, provincial side, and Hazel McCannon from Mississauga. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm. There's been a
Yeah.
concerted effort at the municipal level,
Yes.
especially with progressives, to
Yeah.
elect a more diverse, better representative municipal governments.
Okay.
And what you'll find with mayors is often, many small municipalities have women mayors or women councillors, because they're not paid very much, if at all. And so
Oh,
you find a lot of women, but even, organizations of municipal councillors, they're really trying to be more representative. This has been a concerted
yeah.
effort over the last several years. And with Valérie Plante and Projet Montréal, first of all, they had a star candidate, but they really tried to reach out and elect a much more diverse representative group of councillors. And the
Yes.
same in Toronto. Before Chow was elected in the last full municipal election, there was a real outreach by Progress Toronto to
Oh,
encourage diverse candidates to run for elected office. I knocked on many doors for many of those candidates, and
okay.
many of them, most of them got elected, which is very exciting. And so
Wow.
when Chow came in, she suddenly has this group of
Yeah.
progressive, diverse counselors who and she brought with her an ability to work across party lines, which I think is the most striking. So, until, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, I would say we were not better represented
Oh,
at
okay.
municipal politics. And yes, travel is an issue provincially and federally.
Yes.
Time is an issue. All of the gender dynamics, lack of childcare, lack of support for families, who we
Yes.
see as leaders. We've never elected a woman prime minister. And right now, I think we have two or maybe three premiers out of 13 provincial and territorial leaders who are women.
Wow.
So it's we've got a lot of work to do, and internationally our ranking is about 65th, I think, or 61st in the world
Oh my
of
goodness.
the representation of women in federal parliaments. Like
In
Canada is
federal.
not doing well. We
Okay.
have only about 30% women, which is not good enough. So I think municipal is a great place
Okay.
for aspiring politicians to start,
Yes.
because it is, there are no parties officially. Sometimes there are informal, this person's in a more left group, that person's more right,
Yes.
but there are no official parties, and you are really engaging closely at the grassroots level with the community. So I think municipal
Yeah.
municipal politics is a great way to start. And many provincial and federal politicians do start there. And I know Jack Layton was head of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and he was often encouraging municipal politicians to run for federal office. And many
Oh,
of them
okay.
did have, continue to. So I think a municipal is a great way to start, but I would never discourage someone from doing what I and many others have done, which is go to the level that best suits you.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if I'm correct, but I think Olivia Chow was an MP before and then she became mayor. I'm not sure.
She worked for an MP.
Okay.
She was a city councillor. Her and Jack Layton were both Toronto city councillors. Then
Okay.
he got elected federally, and then
Yes.
she got elected, and then she left to run for mayor after Jack died.
Okay.
And then this time recently was elected.
I can't imagine being mayor for Toronto. It just seems it's like it's a little country by itself. I imagine the leadership and the work she has to do for that. It
She's
seems like a
having
lot
the
of work.
she's having the time of her life.
Yes.
She is having a lot of, I won't say
That,
fun because that makes it sound flippant, but
yeah.
she just got an important housing policy passed yesterday that is going to make an incredible difference. It's going to get the government back into
Oh,
creating
wonderful.
social and affordable housing.
Yes.
And I think you have to set the goal, which this is, and then she's going to go and
Yes.
find the money. And I believe she will find it, because you know what Yogi Berra used to say: if you don't know where you're going, you might end up someplace else. Well, now City Council knows where it's going. It just has to find the money to get there.
I noticed that you speak three languages. Hats off to you. You studied French and literature at the University of Toronto. Do you find that being multilingual can help you appreciate politics a little more, or culture? Is there an advantage to that in terms of like Quebec politics? I just think it's neat when politicians or people can speak many languages. Yeah.
Yeah, I've always been a Francophile. Like, I love the French
Okay.
language,
Yeah.
and I love the arts. I enjoyed studying literature.
Oh, nice.
It's not a deal breaker. You don't need to speak French to go into even federal politics, but I will say it helps, because
Yeah.
Ottawa, especially Parliament Hill, is very much bilingual. And
Yes.
so to be able to listen to debates, participate in debates without having to have translation is
Yes.
a real advantage. And I will say, before that, in my work in the union, I was often the one who was sent to Quebec to work with the Quebecois leadership in the union, because they always appreciated that I could speak in their language, and it helped me gain a greater appreciation for their point of view. Because, as I said, it's a very big country, and Quebec, of course, has the whole language and history layered on. And I would think, if, like, the Governor General, who's Inuk, I mean, having that layer of history and the ability,
Yes.
the linguistic ability, is so important. People feel respected if you at least are attempting to speak their language. But I'm just someone that's just, it's not a deal breaker. You don't need to do
Okay.
that to be in politics. I'm just someone who loves language. And when I was elected, I was studying Ukrainian, because we have a big Ukrainian community in our area.
Oh, interesting.
Um,
Okay.
and I haven't mastered it at all, and I'm learning Italian, because I just thought I should, if I speak French and Spanish, I should know Italian. So
Oh, wow. Good for you. Oh, my goodness.
mi piace parlare italiano.
Just want to end with one final question. Do you see yourself running in politics again, like maybe in municipal level or provincial or federal again, or is that kind of it for you? Or
Yeah, I would love to still be in politics. I really am. I have to say, frankly, it broke my heart when I got defeated, but that sounds arrogant, because you always have people always have the right to make their decision. I
yes,
would love to be elected, but at the
it,
same time, I feel that I had the amazing privilege of being elected. I had my
mhm.
turn, and if it was a choice between me or offering another person the chance to offer themselves, to have that experience, to have that input, I think I'd have to go with someone else. We,
Yes.
provincially have the first Tibetan Canadian elected to
Mhm.
politics in Butila Karpoche. And she's doing an incredible job. So how much better that she is there
Yes.
now as this young, well, she's not a kid, but a much younger person, than having someone like me there. I think it's important to bring in new voices and let people offer what they can to make a difference.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Your thoughts and commentary were just very witty and intelligent and insightful, I found. So I learned a lot more than just a political science class. So
Well, Karli, good luck with your work. Good luck with your degree. And yeah, if you're ever interested in running for elected office, give me a call. Read my book.
I will.
We'll talk.
Okay. Well, have a good rest of the day.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah.